The spaceship Varnock 7 floated quietly above Earth's orbit. Inside, the alien crew, called the Zarvans, watched the humans through strong glass walls. The humans looked calm but curious. They had been taken for a peaceful research program, or at least that's what the aliens said. There were 5 humans in total, 3 men, 2 women. They sat in a white room, clean and bright, with strange humming sounds in the background. Captain Virex, leader of the Zarvan ship, looked at them through a screen. He had gray-blue skin, 4 fingers, and large black eyes. He didn't hate humans. He was just curious. The Zarvans believed in learning from other species. "Bring them some food," Virex said. A smaller alien assistant, Riolo, replied, "We still don't know what they eat." That made Virex pause. He said. "Let's ask them." Inside the room, a soft robotic voice spoke from the ceiling. "Hello, humans. We hope you are comfortable. We have a question." The humans looked up. "What do humans eat?" For a moment, there was silence. Then a man named Chris laughed. "You really want to know?" The voice replied, "Yes. Please answer. We want to understand your species better." Chris looked at the others. A woman named Ava gave a small smile. Another man, Mark, leaned back, arms crossed. There was something playful in their eyes, but also something else. Chris stood up and looked straight at the camera. "Okay," he said. "Here's your answer. We eat plants, vegetables, fruits. That's the nice part." The aliens listened carefully. "But," Chris continued, "we also eat animals." There was a pause. "Meat," he said slowly. "From cows, chickens, pigs, fish, and more. We raise them. We kill them. We cook them. Then we eat them." Virex frowned slightly. He leaned closer to the screen. "We season their meat with herbs and spices. We fry it, roast it, grill it. Sometimes we eat it raw." The aliens didn't respond. Their faces were blank. Chris kept going. "Sometimes we eat things that used to crawl, like crabs, lobsters, even insects in some places. If it moves, someone somewhere has probably tried to eat it." Another alien in the control room whispered, "That's disturbing." Back in the human room, Abba spoke now. "In some parts of our history, when food was gone, people ate whatever they could find, even other humans." The room became quiet. Captain Virex stood up slowly from his chair. "Cannibalism," he said aloud. Chris nodded on the screen. "Only in extreme cases. But yes, it happened." Mark smiled slightly. "We are survivors. When we are hungry, we do whatever it takes." Virex turned to his crew. "They eat their own planet's creatures, and sometimes each other." "They enjoy it," another officer said. "They make cooking shows about it." The crew stared in disbelief. Riolo pulled up Earth videos. Humans were laughing, cooking, and biting into large chunks of meat. One video showed people at a barbecue, grilling ribs and smiling. The aliens watched in horror as humans licked sauce from their fingers. Chris was still talking. "We use knives, forks, fire. We like the smell of cooked meat. Some humans even eat hearts, livers, tongues, brains." "That's enough," said Virex, turning off the speaker. He looked at the glass wall, where the humans now sat quietly again. One of the women, Sarah, looked up at the camera and gave a wink. Later, in his private log, Virex recorded his thoughts. They smiled as they spoke of blood and flesh. They were calm, almost proud. They could not eat for survival alone. They enjoy the process, the hunt, the taste, the victory. "We thought we brought prey on board. But now, I wonder if we have welcomed predators." As the camera feed faded to black, one last image remained. A human biting into an apple slowly, eyes fixed on the lens, and smiling. The Zarvan ship was silent. Captain Virex stood in the observation room, watching Earth spin slowly in space. The images from earlier, the humans describing their food habits, still echoed in his mind. He had seen many species across the galaxy, but none like them. "They eat," he whispered, "like hunters. He turned to his science officer, Larix. Study their hunting behavior. I want to understand what kind of species we are dealing with. Larix nodded and got to work. Hours later, strange videos from Earth started playing on the screens in the research lab. The Zarvan crew watched with wide eyes and stiff bodies. Humans hiding in trees. Humans crawling in the grass with weapons. Humans chasing wild animals with spears and arrows. Humans setting traps. One video showed a man smiling proudly next to a dead lion. They hunt animals stronger than them, Larix said quietly. They kill creatures with claws, teeth, and speed. Another screen showed a human swimming in the ocean, then wrestling a giant fish with his bare hands. They are not the strongest nor the fastest, Larix continued. But they win, because they think, plan, and never give up. Captain Virex watched the footage with a strange feeling in his chest. Fear. Admiration. He wasn't sure. Relo, the assistant, stepped forward. Sir, look at this. He played a documentary about human history. Battles, wars, explorers hunting whales in freezing oceans, tribes surviving in the deserts, soldiers tracking enemies through snowstorms. They hunt for food, for power, for sport, for survival, Riolo said. It's in their blood. Meanwhile, the humans inside the containment room were laughing and talking. They seemed completely relaxed. Chris leaned back. You think they're scared of us yet? Abba smiled. They will be. Sarah pulled out a small item from her pocket. A tiny tooth-shaped charm. Mark noticed it and asked, still carrying that wolf tooth. She nodded. Killed it when I was 16. It tried to eat our goats. I ate it instead. They laughed, but the camera in the corner caught every word. And the aliens heard it all. In the research lab, the alien crew didn't laugh. Captain Virex turned away from the screen. They are a hunting species, he said. And worse, they enjoy it. Riolo spoke carefully. Sir, should we be afraid? Virex didn't answer right away. Then he said, they are not here to hunt us. Not yet. But if they ever see us as prey. He didn't finish the sentence. Back in the human room, the food arrived. A tray slid through a panel in the wall. It had glowing green cubes and soft blue paste. Chris picked up a cube and sniffed it. Smells like plastic. He looked at the camera. This is food. A robotic voice answered, it is full nutrition. Very healthy. Mark shook his head. You guys have no idea what you're missing. He pulled out an invisible imaginary plate and spoke dramatically. Now imagine this, fresh steak, grilled over a wood fire seasoned with garlic, salt, and pepper. Sizzling hot, juices dripping. Ava joined in, with mashed potatoes, butter melting on top, and roasted corn, sweet, smoky, golden. Sarah added in ice cream, cold, soft, sweet like a dream. They all closed their eyes like they could taste it. Outside the room, the aliens were completely silent. They don't just eat to survive, one officer whispered. They love food. They create it. They perfect it. They celebrate it. Larix stepped forward again. Sir, there's something else. He showed a photo of an ancient cave painting. It's over 20,000 Earth years old. Humans hunting mammoths, working together, planning. Even back then, Larix said, they were not just animals. They were organized. Later that night, Captain Virex recorded another log. We thought they were just another organic species, but they are far more complex. They are hunters not by chance, but by design. Their bodies are weak, yet their minds are weapons. They kill without needing claws. They dominate without needing size. And they never stop improving their methods. He paused. We asked what they eat, but perhaps the real question is, what won't they eat? He closed the log. Behind him on the screen, the humans were now doing push-ups, laughing, telling stories about camping in forests and fighting bears. Predators, he thought. in human skin. The quiet hum of the Zarvan ship filled the air as Captain Virex stared at the screen. The humans were still inside their room, playing games and laughing. They seemed so carefree, so harmless. But Virex knew better now. What they had shown him, what they had said, had planted a deep seed of fear inside him. The earlier footage had left him unsettled. Humans did not just eat to survive. No. They hunted, killed, and consumed not only for sustenance but for pleasure. And worse, they did it together. They thrive on it, Virex murmured. It's in their bones. The research team had been working hard, digging deeper into Earth's past. They scrolled through more old human footage that began to reveal the darker truth. A new video popped up on the screen. It was black and white, filmed from a long time ago. Humans standing on the edge of a cliff, looking at the bodies of fallen comrades. These are the survivors, the narrator said in the video. Those who made it through the Great Famine. The video showed people scavenging, digging through ruins for food. Faces drawn with hunger. Desperation in their eyes. The air was thick with silence. Some humans were eating. Other humans. Relo gasped. They ate each other, he whispered. Virex watched intently. The video cut to another scene, this one even older, with a deep voice explaining in a language that Virex didn't understand. But the images were enough to speak for themselves. Men and women armed with weapons were fighting for the last scraps of food. The screen flashed pictures of humans biting into raw meat, hands covered in blood. A group of humans huddled together, eating chunks of something unrecognizable. They were smiling, but there was no joy in it, only hunger. The Zarvan's minds raced. This, Larek said softly, this is their true history. Virex paused the video. There's more, he asked. Relo nodded, hands shaking. Yes, Captain. They have faced destruction and hunger countless times, and every time they survived. Virex stood up from his seat, his mind filled with images of humans gnawing on bones, fighting for food. It was almost as if they had a deep, primal need not just to survive, but to feed, to conquer hunger, no matter the cost. The next footage was even darker. A documentary about the age of the Great Plagues. It showed human families hiding in caves, starving. This is what happens when resources run out, the voice on the screen explained. When the earth has nothing left to give, people turn to extreme measures. In one clip, humans were seen breaking open the bodies of animals they had hunted for food. They were tearing into the flesh with their bare hands. Some had gone so far as to boil down the bones to make broth, using every scrap of the animal. They were using everything. Virex's face tightened. These creatures are terrifying, he muttered. Larex agreed. They don't just survive by taking what's easy to get. They adapt, they change. And when there's nothing left, they turn on each other on the land itself. They consume everything. Meanwhile, inside the human room, Chris and the others were having a much lighter conversation. But even their smiles didn't hide the cold edge to their words. Abba spoke, glancing at the camera. When food is scarce, people will do anything. I've heard stories. People in the past, they'd eat their own families. Mark chuckled darkly. Hey, in some places, eating another human was a last resort. A way to survive. A way to beat death. Sarah grinned. It's not as simple as you think, though. If it was, we'd never stop eating each other. Chris laughed. True. But we don't do that anymore. We've learned. We've grown. The ones who made it through the worst times, they were strong survivors. The Zarvans didn't know what to make of this. They had been told that human history was about war and destruction, about reaching for the stars. But this side, this dark history of hunger, was something they hadn't expected. Captain Virex paced back and forth in the control room. His mind kept returning to the faces of the humans, to the way they spoke about survival, about eating. Rielo brought up another file, a story from Earth's distant past. It was an old tale from a time when humans lived in small villages. The story told of a great famine. The fields were empty, and the forests had been stripped bare. People were starving, their bellies hollow, and in the end some of them turned to hunting other humans, not for food, but for power. They would eat their enemies, knowing that by doing so, they could steal their strength. The Zarvans watched in silence. Rilo had never been so disturbed. Virex shut down the screens. He turned to his crew. "They are dangerous." His voice was firm, shaking with realization. "They may seem harmless, small, weak, but when they are hungry, when they need to survive, there is nothing they won't do." Larex looked at the humans through the observation window. They think differently. They see hunger as a challenge. They don't fear it. They conquer it. "They will do anything to survive," Virex said grimly, "even if it means eating each other." The video feed showed the humans now sitting down to a meal. A simple one of bread and water, but the way they ate, it was almost as if they were savoring it. A reminder that hunger had once driven them to eat anything, and in the end it had made them stronger. Captain Virex leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "If we are to face them, we must be prepared. They are not prey. They are predators." Captain Virex couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The humans, calm, collected, and eerily confident, were not acting like prisoners. They had come aboard the Zarvan ship, but somehow it felt like they were the ones in control. He had seen their history. He had heard their stories. He had learned of their hunger. And now, as the ship drifted in the cold emptiness of space, he couldn't stop thinking about it. What would they do if they were pushed to the edge? Could they be the predators he feared? Inside the containment room, the humans were beginning to settle into a routine. They didn't seem nervous anymore. There were no signs of panic, no signs of distress. They were relaxed, comfortable even. Ava and Mark were sitting together, laughing about something that wasn't important. Chris and Sarah were leaning against the wall, talking quietly, eyes flicking from the observation camera to each other. They spoke in low tones, but Virex could hear snippets of their conversation through the ship's monitoring systems. "What do you think their food really tastes like?" Chris asked, grinning. "Does it matter?" Sarah replied, "You think we can get used to this bland paste they give us?" Mark laughed from across the room. "Who knows? Maybe it's just a matter of time before we learn to like it." The comment was meant to be lighthearted, but there was a darkness in the way Chris replied. "Or maybe," he said slowly, "we won't need to learn to like it." A cold silence hung in the air for a moment. The crew, watching through the screens, felt it. Virex felt it too. That little exchange, it didn't sound like a joke anymore. It was a warning. Later that day, the Zarvans decided to introduce the humans to more food. This time, a new type of meat from an alien world they had prepared for them. The ship's AI sent the food into the containment room through a small hatch, and the humans eagerly approached. The dish was presented with a glowing blue substance, sticky and strange, wrapped around the meat. The scent was unfamiliar but oddly sweet. There were no spices, no sauces. It was raw, alien, and the humans didn't seem to care. Chris picked up a piece of the meat and sniffed it. "Well, I guess we have to try it," he said with a chuckle. He took a bite, chewing slowly, savoring it. Mark followed, then Sarah. Their eyes lit up with surprise. "This isn't bad," Ava said, her eyes wide. It's not good, but it's not terrible." The crew of the Zarvan ship watched in silence. The humans were eating the alien food with what appeared to be genuine enjoyment. But that wasn't what concerned Virex. What worried him was the way they were looking at each other, smiling in that strange, knowing way. The way they had been smiling before, as if they were playing some kind of game. At that moment, Rilo, the assistant, leaned closer to Virex. "Sir," he said quietly, "I don't think they are reacting the way we expected." Virex's eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" Rilo gestured to the screen, showing the humans still eating. "They are eating it as if it's nothing, as if they've eaten worse before." The captain felt his heart skip a beat. Of course, he murmured. They've eaten worse. But they're not just eating it. They're enjoying it. Minutes later, the humans finished the strange meal and seemed satisfied. But then something unexpected happened. Chris, who had been the most vocal about their hunger for real food, stood up with a mischievous look on his face. You know, he said, looking directly at the camera, this place is full of surprises. But I'm getting tired of all this bland stuff. He waved his hand dismissively toward the empty plates. We should make a deal, Mark said, grinning. Let's see what you really eat. I bet we'd like it more than this. He paused. I'm sure we'd love it. The others nodded in agreement, eyes glinting. The camera stayed focused on them for a moment, then panned back to the Zarvans, who watched in stunned silence. Did they just threaten us? Riolo whispered. Virex felt a cold sweat form on his skin. His mind raced. The humans weren't simply accepting their fate. They weren't just prisoners. They were playing a game. Testing the boundaries, pushing the limits. The next few hours were filled with quiet tension. The Zarvans had to decide what to do. If the humans were testing them, playing with them, they needed to be careful. But what if there was something more to this? What if they were warning them, showing them that they had tasted fear before, and now they were fearless? Virex stood at the window, looking at Earth. He had once seen their planet as a place to explore, a place for knowledge. Now it felt like a cage, and the humans were the ones holding the key. As he watched the Earth from space, his thoughts were interrupted by a sudden voice. It was a familiar voice. Captain, we have a situation. Virex turned sharply. What is it? He asked. A terrified look appeared on Larex's face. There's been a breach in the holding area. Virex felt a chill run through him. What kind of breach? Larex swallowed. I think the humans are planning something we didn't expect. The warning alarms blared throughout the Zarvan ship. Red lights flashed in every hallway, filling the air with a sense of urgency. Captain Virex's heart raced as he turned sharply towards Larex, who stood frozen, eyes wide with panic. What do you mean, a breach? Virex demanded. What is happening? Larex stammered, the containment room, Captain. The humans, something is wrong. The words failed him, and Virex wasted no time. He spun around and raced toward the control room, the sound of his boots echoing through the ship's metallic corridors. Inside the human containment room, chaos had erupted. The once peaceful, relaxed atmosphere had been replaced with a growing tension. The humans had started whispering to each other in low tones, exchanging glances, their faces more serious now. It was clear they weren't just playing games anymore. Something had shifted. Chris, Ava, Sarah, and Mark had gathered around the room's central table. They were watching the cameras, calculating, analyzing. Their laughter was gone, replaced with focused eyes and sharp movements. We need to move quickly, Chris said in a low voice, his eyes flicking to the camera. If we don't make our move now, they'll lock us in again. Are we really doing this? Mark asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty but also excitement. Are you afraid? Ava teased, though her eyes were cold. Mark smiled darkly. No, not anymore. Sarah stepped forward, her voice cold and determined. We need to remind them who's in charge here. We'll show them that we can be just as dangerous as they think we are. Virex and his team arrived at the control room, their faces grim. They activated the cameras in the containment room, their screens flashing to life. What they saw made their blood run cold. The humans were no longer just sitting and waiting. They were preparing. They had found something in the room, something they were now using as tools. Sharp, jagged pieces of metal, bits of broken machinery, anything that could be fashioned into a weapon. And they were working together, efficiently. Relo, Virex said, his voice sharp. What are they doing? They're arming themselves, Relo replied, his voice shaky. But with what? The room was supposed to be secure. They've been planning this from the start, Larex said, voice filled with disbelief. They'd known all along that they couldn't rely on the ship's food. Virex's gaze hardened, No, this isn't about food anymore. This is about survival. Back inside the containment room, the humans moved with purpose. They had formed a loose circle, with Chris at the center. Mark was working with Sarah, their hands quick and precise as they fashioned crude weapons from the debris around them. Abba stood off to the side, watching carefully, her eyes flicking to the camera every few moments. Chris looked up, his eyes meeting the camera's lens. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Only a cold, calculating look that sent a shiver down Virex's spine. "You've underestimated us," Chris said softly, just loud enough for the cameras to hear. "You've watched us eat your food, accept your captivity. But that was never the plan." The crew watched in stunned silence. The humans were making a bold move, one they hadn't expected. They weren't just prisoners anymore. They were hunters. "We eat to survive," Ava continued, her voice low but intense. "But what happens when you push a species too far? When we stop being hungry for your food and start being hungry for something else?" Riolo swallowed hard. "They're threatening us." Virex clenched his fists. "They don't just survive. They hunt. But who are they hunting?" "Us." The humans, armed and ready, moved swiftly. The sharp metal edges they'd scavenged glinted in the dim light. They had crafted makeshift weapons, small but deadly. The ship's systems were in disarray as they triggered small power surges, causing the lights to flicker and the doors to lock randomly. It was as if they were testing the limits of the ship's security. In the control room, Virex's heart raced. This was no longer a simple containment issue. The humans had planned their escape, or worse, a confrontation. "We need to secure the room," Virex barked. "Lock them in. We cannot let them out." Riolo quickly attempted to override the security system, but the humans were already one step ahead. They had disabled the locks. Inside the containment room, Sarah turned to the others. "It's time," she said quietly. "Time for what?" Mark asked, his voice edged with tension. "Time to show them what happens when humans decide they're done being hunted," Sarah answered, a wicked grin playing on her lips. Suddenly, the door to the containment room opened. The humans were no longer sitting, waiting. They were standing, moving toward the opening door. Their eyes were sharp, calculating, and behind them, the gleam of the makeshift weapons reflected the red lights of the ship's alarms. Virex's mind raced. "They'd figured out how to break out," he said in disbelief. "How did they?" Before he could finish his sentence, a loud bang echoed through the control room as the security doors were forced open. The humans had breached the next level of containment. They were coming for them. "Close the doors," Virex shouted. But it was too late. The humans had already stepped into the hall, their movements swift, coordinated. They were no longer just prisoners. They were predators, ready to hunt. As the alarms blared, the Zarvans were faced with a terrifying reality. The humans, with their hunger for survival, had taken the fight to them. The sound of footsteps echoed through the dark hallways of the Zarvan ship. The red emergency lights flickered, casting eerie shadows as the humans moved through the ship like ghosts. Virex stood at the helm of the control room, his fists clenched. His mind was in chaos. The humans had broken free, their makeshift weapons in hand, and they were closing in. Every step they took brought them closer to him, closer to the crew. But it wasn't just the weapons that frightened him. It was the calmness in their eyes, the way they moved together, unified and relentless. This was no longer about food. This was something darker. A primal urge had awakened, and the humans had embraced it fully. He had underestimated them. They had survived wars, famine, plague, and now they had turned that hunger toward him and his people. In the hallway, Chris led the charge, his weapon, a jagged piece of metal, held tightly in his hand. His eyes burned with the same intensity he had shown back on Earth. Ava, Mark, and Sarah flanked him, each of them ready. They had tasted the Zarvan food, yes, but they weren't hungry for that anymore. What they craved now was something far more dangerous. Power. And they would take it by any means necessary. "We don't have time to waste," Chris muttered, his voice low and steady. "We know what to do," Ava replied, her voice cold, devoid of fear. "We're ready." Virex's breath was shallow as he turned to his crew. "Seal the doors. We cannot let them get any closer." But it was too late. The humans were already inside the control room. The door to the control room slid open with a hiss, revealing Chris, his eyes burning with that same cold, focused energy. He stepped inside first, followed by Ava, Mark, and Sarah, their weapons raised but not aimed yet. For a moment, there was silence. The humans stood there, watching the Zarvans with a calculating look. Virex could feel the weight of their gaze, their hunger for something far more than food. Then Chris spoke. "You've seen us at our weakest, our hunger. But you never saw what comes after. The survival instinct," he said, his voice eerily calm. "And now we've turned it on you." The tension in the room was unbearable. Virex's heart pounded in his chest. He had been trained to face many threats, aliens, war, disease, but nothing had prepared him for this. Nothing had prepared him for humans. "You're not like anything we faced before," Virex said, his voice barely a whisper. "You were just supposed to be a curiosity. And that's where you made your mistake," Ava said, her eyes gleaming in a low light. "You thought we were weak. You thought we'd break. But the truth is, we've always been dangerous. You just didn't look closely enough." Mark stepped forward. "We don't just eat to survive. We eat to conquer. We've done it before, and we'll do it again. And you—" He glanced around the room at the Zarvans. "You're just the next meal." Virex's mind raced. These humans, who had once seemed so small, so fragile, had turned the tables completely. He had underestimated them, and now they were showing no mercy. "We are not prey," Virex said, his voice shaking with the weight of the realization. "You can't win this fight." Chris smiled, a cruel, predatory grin. "We already have." In one swift motion, the humans lunged forward, their weapons raised. But before anything could happen, the ship's loudspeaker crackled to life. "Attention. All systems are now locked down. You are out of time." It was the ship's AI, the same one that had overseen everything since the Zarvans had boarded Earth. For a moment, the humans froze. The Zarvans' crew, on edge, waited for their next move. Chris's expression shifted. He wasn't shocked. He wasn't surprised. He was merely calculating the next step. "Did you think you could lock us in?" Chris sneered. "We've been locked up our entire lives. It's nothing new to us." He motioned to the others, and within seconds, they were making their way to the ship's control panel. The AI systems were a puzzle to them, yes, but puzzles were something humans excelled at solving. "You want to control us?" Mark said, his voice dripping with contempt. "You want to make us weak? We're not weak, and we're not going to just sit here and be locked up." The humans worked together, faster than the Zarvans could react. They reached the control systems, and in a matter of moments, they had overridden the ship's lockdown. The doors slid open, and the lights returned to their normal settings. The AI, once a safeguard, was now theirs to command. "Now we're in charge," Ava said, her voice low, full of triumph. Virex stood there stunned. The humans had beaten them. Not just physically, but mentally. They had used their hunger, their drive to survive, to break through every barrier, every lock, every limitation the Zarvans had placed on them. "Leave Earth," Chris said coldly, "and never come back." The humans turned and walked away, leaving Virex and his crew standing in the empty control room, the realization settling in. The Zarvans had learned the hard way. Humans were not just survivors. They were predators.